Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This is the Giggle economy. My name is David Mascorro, a currently quarantined comedian living in Austin, Texas, waiting for the time that I can get back on stage. But in the meantime, while it's not safe to do comedy outside, no big deal if you do, just not for me. I sit down on Zoom. I talk to some friends about the jobs that shaped our lives, and we hope that you enjoy it on the internet. I am joined today by a very funny guy, a guy that I've met a long time ago in a very specific way, and we'll get into that in the podcast. Mr. Tyler Landon Mace. Thank you so much for being here, Tyler.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Since I've done any podcast or been on stage or anything.
Yeah, so I want to, the way we met, and tell me if you have a different, because this is the best thing about a podcast. We always, the origin stories about how the two characters met. I like to think of things in a narrative like that. The way that I remember we met is, I think it was at this open mic that was inside a cannabis shop that you were managing. Is that correct?
I had met you before that, but it was my first night ever doing comedy.
So yeah, please tell me about that. Tell me about where we worked. Let's think a step before that.
So it was at Alberta Street Pub,
Yeah.
It's been so long since I've been up there. So yeah, it was my first night doing comedy in Portland. I had done it one night before in Virginia, but it had gone very poorly. So I thought I'd never do it again. I remember saying that to myself as I left that first night of my open mic back in Richmond, Virginia. I was like, well, at least I did it once, and now I can never do it again and embarrass myself like that. But something made me decide to do it in Portland. So I went to, what's the place on MLK? Curious Comedy Theater?
Yeah.
Yep, went there, did an open mic, and then I went to Alberta Street Pub. And then afterwards, you were at the bar talking with Danny Feltz.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm just standing there like new comic with no one to talk to. And you guys both looked friendly enough. And I just walked up and just like, I was so high energy because I had just gotten off stage and was still jittery with nerves and everything. And I think I just blabbered for 5 minutes. And then you were like, that's really cool, man. Well, welcome to comedy. And then I was like, great. And then just walked outside and walked home all pumped. That was the first time I ever talked to you. I'm not surprised you don't remember it because I was just a new comic, probably seemed like I was on coke or something like that.
I think every comedian has a story that's like that if you've done it long enough. It's one of those things where as this year progresses in from 2020 to 2021, the thing I miss most about my life that I had before quarantine happened was that you get to hang out with comedians. I think that's an essential part of learning how to be comfortable, learning to find that voice, learning to tell jokes, and learning to be comfortable enough with yourself to go on stage and share a bit of yourself. So the essential part is the hang, right? So I was talking to Danny, who I've known for years, and I think is a fascinating person. I've interviewed him before for a podcast, and I just think he's just such an interesting guy, and he's got such an interesting look. And if you guys don't know Danny Feltz, go look him up. He's very funny and very, very interesting, and just overall nice guy. So I'm sure I was talking to Danny about something he was reading at the time or a joke he was working on that I really liked. It's just one of those things where it's kind of like. And now I always make weird analogies, but I will say with this, it's kind of like in video games where it's like Pokemon, where at some point you like the skills and attributes of another creature that has similar aspects to what you do. And Danny Feltz would be like Danny Feltz, and that's what he would repeat over and over again. And I just wanted to talk to him about everything he knew. But so I was probably really in that conversation. When you came up and you said, I'm brand new, I didn't recognize you. And I was like, I'm always grateful that people want to talk to us. I'm never going to shut anyone down, but also because it was our first interaction, I probably didn't know. I was like, oh, I don't know if that was a one-time thing. If that was is this guy from The Office? He was the Office funny guy, and now he tried it, and maybe he'll never do it again. And it's one of those things. As you keep going in comedy, you maybe don't know how much of yourself to give to someone at the very beginning, because it might be too weird. What if I came off really strong at the very oh hey yeah, and then I gave you my whole life story in the first 5 minutes, and then but
it's really weird when you look back on there are so many comics I'm friends with here in Portland that when I think back, I can't remember when we met. It was just that they were just a face in the crowd until one day there was a conversation or a joint smoking circle or something that made us actual friends. But yeah, I barely remember meeting anybody except for on the first few nights where it was like Caitlin Warehouser, you, Katie Rose Leon. These were like, people I was meeting for the first time and seeing on stage like really do very well. So it was like, and when you first start comedy, it's so weird to be around people that also care about this thing enough to actually try doing it.
Yeah. This is another comparison. And I am a person that puts too much cultural relevance on video games, movies, all this stuff. But this is what I like. It's who I am. I can't deny it at this point. But it kind of reminds me of this. It's kind of like when Truman started figuring out in the Truman Show that he was on a TV show, and all the characters, like, you're like, once the facade is gone, and you're like, you just became a character in my life too. I'm always going to see from my POV, and you had like, you don't remember when other supporting characters came in your life. You're like, they were just they've always just been there. And it's just, I love that movie for that fact that like, oh yeah, if someone was filming this, we don't have time to show all the exposition of when all these characters and go back to the backstories of all those other characters. They only get to interact with the main character, which in this case is just my POV.
Yeah, and this what made me think of, or what it reminds me of, is in The Sopranos, there were like 2 or 3 people who were always just background characters until like season 4, and then all of a sudden they're like main. I guess enough characters died, they had to move people up.
Well, knock on wood, as we are in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, hopefully all the supporting and characters in our lives stick around for many, many more seasons if we want to keep using that terminology. I remember, like I said, it's so wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to me today. It's so wonderful to see you. I'm so glad to see that you're well. I was following you online, and because we have been living such an insular life, such a life inside and being careful, you actually went on a trip.
Indeed. It was very strange. Like the plan was to visit my family for Christmas and drive to the East Coast and then quarantine in North Carolina. And my parents have a small beach house out there. And then I was going to quarantine there for 2 weeks and then go see them. And then my parents called me and were like, we don't want you doing that in the middle of the winter. That's when things will be the worst, and snow on the ground and everything. So we moved it up to September. And then all the wildfires in Oregon happened, and it was literally toxic air outside. Like, I had a straight up panic attack one morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, woke up and checked the air quality website, and there was a glitch on it. So instead of saying it was like 475, which is still a terrifying number of like pollutants, it said 47,500.
Oh no.
Yeah, it accidentally had 2 extra zeros on it. And then it said that the main pollutant was carbon monoxide. So I went into like a full freak out thinking that the entire city was about to like suffocate in our sleep. And then once I realized that wasn't the case, that it was just a glitch on the website, I was like, all right, I need to get the fuck out of Oregon. Like, having the air filled with smoke for like 2 weeks was really fucking with me mentally. We drove for 8 hours all the way through Oregon and Idaho before we got through the smoke. So that was just a wild time then. And then the whole way across the country, we either camped or stayed in Airbnbs where we didn't interact with anybody, and had food that we had gotten at Fred Meyer with our food stamps that was like, lasted for weeks basically. And driving across the country without interacting with anybody is a strange feeling. It's like you just pull into gas stations, get gas, and then pull off, and there's no restaurants or anything like that. It was really strange, but it was beautiful to get to drive across the country. I really liked it.
And did you, because when I was watching it, and people should, what's your Instagram so people can follow you? Did you save any video of all your travels and like that?
There's videos on there from it. Yeah. My Instagram handle is Your Dog Loves Me.
Perfect. I'll share it on the link below. That way people can follow you. I found it fascinating. I was in my head, how far did you only get to where your parents live, or did you go further up east?
Then we went up to see Kelsey's family up in New York. So that was my girlfriend, Kelsey. So we actually went back down to North Carolina for 2 weeks, and then back up, and then up to New York, and then back across the country.
Nice.
And for a couple days, which was great.
Did you say, what was the last one part you said?
We stopped in Maine for a few days before.
I was wondering, because it felt like it was tip to tip from Maine to Oregon. It felt like you were just going cross country.
Maine, all the way across. Yeah.
And
it was really crazy going through the Midwest, where the states that you hear about having like the worst cases, I think Chicago was the only place we went where people were wearing masks and seemed to even acknowledge that anything was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I fully admit that driving across the country during all this wasn't, the safest thing to do, but we did basically interact with no one the entire time. But when we would stop in like, coffee shop really quick in the middle of like Nebraska, there would be just nobody in the whole place wearing a mask and people staring at us like we were idiots for doing it. So it was just that whole stretch of the middle of the country.
I think there's that little, going back to peer pressure and thinking about all that stuff. It's a little scary to think about, like, because I remember I live in Austin now from Oregon, and I remember there was certain, like, I would take a road trip. I'm like, let's just go see a park. Let's just go to I'm fascinated with little weird road stops, and Texas is full of little road stops. So
yeah,
you let's go see this historical graveyard that's full of German settlers, and I would go there, and it was like this. All the tombstones were like from like the I think 1800s, and it was just full of, and there was one section that was full of children. I was like, this is so sad, but so interesting. And I would I would see people, and I would wear a mask when I was out there, and I was just kind of like taking it all in and thinking about the same thing, thinking about how these people experience a different kind of life than I experienced. And some of them didn't even make it past a certain age. Some of them, like I said, a section of it was children. And I just kept thinking, man, for me, it comes down to, if we live in America, I think it's important that people wear masks. I understand that that's very, very necessary. But you kind of, I want to be safe, and I don't want to make anyone else sick. But people have different definitions of being American. They're like, well, my freedom is I don't want to wear one, and I'm like, okay, just avoid the people that are going to mess with my kind of freedom. My freedom says I want to stay safe and I want to be social distant, but I want to, and that was a hard thing where we talk about like people colliding that are from different viewpoints. There's not only like political, but socioeconomic and just different lifestyles. They don't get it. Like what COVID is, and what, I haven't done an indoor show since March of last year.
Yeah, I think February was the last show that I was on.
So I think it was like March 3rd or something like that. And then things started shutting down, and my work went from office to work from home, and that's when everything started like switching up. And we were like, what's happening? And I was going to the grocery store, and I was buying as many, necessities as I could, but not trying to leave things for other people. That was very much a concern in my head. Even in March, I go, well, other people might need it too, so I'll just get a 12-pack of toilet paper, I'll get a dozen eggs, I'll get this and that, and we'll all just see what happens, because no one really knew what it was going to be. But it was just such a freaking mind jarring time at that time. And I think, like I said, you were safe. I think you can't be afraid of, like, at what point you and your girlfriend just got on the road, you're going to go see family, but the road, your car is safe. You're not picking up hitchhikers. You're not wearing masks. So it's like, at some point, maybe at the best point, that's the best point to see it, because, it just, what else are you going to do with your time? It's because I just feel like I've never gotten house arrest before this time. And I feel like rich people get house arrest because they have nicer houses. And when they say they go, like, I remember hearing, and I don't want to say anything too bad, but I remember Ellen saying that she was going crazy in her house during her COVID quarantine. And I was like, I live in a crappier house than Ellen. I can't, I feel, why does Ellen get to complain? I haven't been complaining. Wait a minute. Should I be complaining more? I don't like this too. And it's just like, why does Ellen probably has a pool and can see movies whenever she wants. And I was just, I don't know. It's been a very frustratingly, cornucopia of emotion time right now. It's just, and I imagine traveling would make me feel good. And I always, when I was watching your travels, I've been rambling too long, but as I was watching your travels, I really enjoyed seeing the trip through your eyes. And tell me a little bit more. What was your favorite part of those travels, and what you liked? Because you were pointing out different things. You were taking photos and sharing videos from certain parts. Tell me a little bit more about what your favorite parts were, and just about the experience for you.
Yeah, I tried to take a picture or short video every day to put up on Instagram, just so we would have that, basically have a record of everything. because like when I was growing up, my family was big on taking pictures of everything, and then we have these big photo albums, and I really miss having that. I really want to start doing that stuff again, like actually print out pictures and have a physical record of things. So I really tried to make a conscious effort to do that through this whole trip and take a picture of like one interesting thing a day, which didn't always work out. Some things are just not interesting. Some days had nothing interesting happening. And
what was the day that you tried? You looked at your camera and you're like, this is not going to be Instagram worthy.
There was one that was like, it was nice enough, but you know how lots of small towns have like the art installation that they'll have all over the city. Like we have ponies here, so we have different colored ponies all through town. Well, it was a small town called Lindsborg, I think, in Kansas, which is settled mostly by Swedish people. Everything there is Swedish. So they had these little horses that I guess some sort of Swedish horse that have different, paintings on them and stuff. And that was the best thing I could find in Kansas was this horse. It's still pretty, but it was like nothing compared to when we were like in Utah with Arches National Park, which was by far my favorite place. Have you ever been there before?
I've been through Utah. So I drove through the state of Utah when I moved from Oregon to Austin. Mm-hmm. We drove through and we stopped at Salt Lake City, but we drove through the mountains. It was beautiful. We're like, wow, Utah is breathtaking.
Utah really is amazing. Nobody ever talks about that. Maybe they try to keep it quiet like Oregonians used to just keep people out. But Arches is like, this park that's all like kind of orangish red rocks that are in big arches and big formations, just really geologically amazing. If I remember correctly, it was like a seafloor at one point that then got like raised up onto this plateau when the earth underneath it rose up, which is just fascinating. But you drive up onto like this plateau and then you can't see anything but the park when you're up there. So it looks like straight out of the Flintstones to me. Like all of the landscape just looks like cartoon Flintstones landscape of all this rocky stuff everywhere. So I was just amazed when we were up there. That was my favorite thing by far. And seeing fossilized dinosaur footprints in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
That was quite cool. I was freaking out.
Yeah. And I will say, I didn't really explain, that's such a nice description. I like those two members. I love traveling for those very reasons of having like a mind passport. I know it's I'm as I do this podcast, I start becoming like Tony Robbins. I'm saying all these weird phrases that I've never said in my life. Like I've never said mind passport before this episode, but I want to make sure people know that like, it's not just as I miss comedy, I miss communicating in a way that is more elaborate than just text, than just emails, I want to be more flowery with my words and try to express how much I'm missing right now during this time of deprivation, because I can't wait to, like I am it's more like those books, those really good books you read when you first started getting into reading, and they're so descriptive and they describe a place like on Walden Pond or something like that, where he's talking about trees and water and blades of grass, and you're like, I want to go there, and you go there and you're like, oh, it's just a lake and some trees. But to him, he must have experienced it at some point of his life that he really needed to have it, and it really created a memory for him. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I always try to constantly do that in my head since we've been in COVID times. And I love that about you. And another thing I like about you, I didn't explain how we met. Like I said about the dispensary, you're just a big, did you have, now you don't have to say this because this will be on YouTube and on podcasts and everything like that. You're a big advocate of legal marijuana. I think we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about when my conversation I remember having with you was me, you, and Dan Weber sitting out, and we were going to record a live episode of my podcast, of my other podcast called The Awkward Phase. And then I just don't think enough people were out or whatever, but we just ended up talking. No one showed up to this live taping, and we just ended up talking. Yeah, we just ended up talking and just having a good time knowing you. And you said you were getting to know everyone in the scene. It was Dan Weber, who's hilarious, you and me, just like chatting about why this form that I love so much, podcasting, is important, and how to get to know people, and how it really connects you to communities and art and in like comedy, or just in people in general. People will reach out to me and watch the podcast and go, wow, I didn't really know anything about Tyler, and now I feel like I know him way more, and I can't wait to talk to him about it. Or they talk to someone else, or that's what I love about it, that we just get to connect more as human beings, and maybe not have the conversation we would have at a show before we go up, because we're going to be in our heads. This is a way for us to just have a conversation and then just enjoy each other's company and learn something about each other.
Yeah, it's definitely what got me into, one of the things that drew me to stand up in the first place was just getting to, being in Virginia before I moved out here and listening to podcasts like the Crab Feast and listening to comedians talk with each other. It just like drew me in with like the idea of having that sort of, just community to talk about this sort of stuff, like not just comedy, but anything that you're interested in.
Uh,
I remember so specifically that night at the Hot Box is what it was called.
Hot Box, and you're like I said, I was going to say the thing I was going to say. You're a big proponent of. Are you a big proponent of nationwide legalization of marijuana?
Yeah, have been since I started smoking it when I was 15, I'd say.
And we'll get into that more, but it would just, I keep skirt. That's how much I get nervous about talking to it. Cause like in Austin, it's like a thing that Willie Nelson lives here, but it's a thing that like isn't legal anywhere. I think CBD is legal. And I do, if there's CBD, I was like, oh yeah, I'll have some, but I can't do anything else within the laws of the state because the cops are scary here.
Yeah, I've been out in Oregon for like over 6 years now, and it's become so normal to me that I forget that other states you can't just be out in the open with. And I'm like, oh yeah, you really have to be careful.
Yeah.
Or not do it at all. I'm surprised. I know so many people that will fly from Oregon, like back to wherever they're from and take weed with them. And they're like, nobody cares. I'm like, people in Kansas where you're flying home to certainly care. Like I'd be pretty careful with that shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. I was going to say, I remember so specifically that night at the Hot Box with you and Dan Weber, because it was supposed to be, you were gonna, if I remember correctly, interview Dan, and then you were gonna pick somebody from the audience and interview them as well.
Yeah.
One audience member show up, my friend Isa, and she came in with her dog, and as she came in, I was like, oh, hey, hopefully other people will show up. He's gonna pick someone from the audience to interview, so I guess he'll probably ask you. And as soon as I said that, I could see in her eyes, like, fuck. Like, yeah. She just turned around and walked out, basically. She was like, I'll go get some coffee or something and be back. And then she just never came back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was you, me, and Dan. And then you were just like, well, I guess this is what we got. So yeah, and it ended up being a really fun podcast for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those memories that like in the absence of an audience, it was always just fun to have the two people. Like we kept taking turns at being at each other's audience. Like you and Dan would be mine, and I would be an audience to you, and Dan would be as well. And it just became this like nice little like, triangle of a conversation that we had, and got to know you from there. And it was just really fun. And like I said, so when you traveled from Maine all the way to Oregon, were you careful with what you were like? Because I imagine you're a person that seems to enjoy it from time to time. Were you careful finding it, or did you not smoke it? Did you abstain? What was your now? Because now it's past the fact, so now you're fine. You're back in Oregon.
That's true. A lot of the states we went through actually have like dispensaries. There are way more than people realize at this point. Maine has legal weed. Massachusetts does. Virginia is like a weird sort of place where it's been decriminalized. So like it's at most like a $50 fine or something like that. So yeah, we just kind of, bits and pieces as we went. The first couple states we were in, it was legal. So we just had like edibles or something like that. But I really don't like driving with weed. Makes me, driving with edibles, something like that, I feel more comfortable. Like I'm not going to get, like, is a cop going to find a cookie and be like, I'm sending this in to get tested. We're going to put it through the centrifuge and see what comes. But yeah, driving with weed just makes me too nervous. And I've already been caught with it before when I was 18. Don't ever want to have to deal with the cops again if I can help it.
It's terrifying. It's one of those things. I'm still from the generation like where it was becoming more and more, because I didn't smoke until I was like 27. I was late to 25, 26 or 27, around that age range. So I was definitely the first time I smoked. I remember the first time I had talked about it on stage one time, but I was at a house party and everyone was smoking and I had never been around it. Speaking of hot box, I had never experienced that before. And I was just at a party in a small apartment where everyone's singing, where everyone was like smoking, and then everyone was talking, and then the room was filling with more and more with smoke. And then I remember I looked down at my shoes and I looked up and I was instantly high. And I had never been high before. And then it felt like it was instantaneously. this acoustic guitar appeared and someone was singing a song by the Flaming Lips. Like that's what it felt like to me. Like I was like, I'm not high. I'm looking down. I'm looking up. I see a DVD that there's like a stack of DVDs, and then I look over and I see an acoustic guitar playing a Flaming Lips song, and I'm like, oh, what is this? This is a new experience.
Man, I knew this dude in high school. I don't want to say his name, but whenever my parents would go out of town in high school, like go down to the beach or like go visit family or something, I would have just a bunch of other potheads come over and we would just get high and everyone sleep at my house. And there was this dude that without fail, I would wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to hear the faint sound of a very loud electric guitar, but off in the distance, and realize that he's gone out to my garage at 3 o'clock in the morning, smoked again probably, and is just blasting electric guitar in the middle of my suburban neighborhood. Like, house full of weed, full of teenagers with no parents around. It's like some people have no thought process that's like, this could lead to the cops coming.
Yeah.
And getting in trouble for this. Like, I would just eventually had to keep that guy out of my house. Be like, you just can't come over here anymore.
It's so funny. Like we always I always think about horror movies, and you always think about that one person. Like, no way that one guy exists. He's like, he walks into the haunted house and be like, I don't believe in ghosts, and then he gets killed right away. You're like, there's always like, that's not real. And then you meet people like that are just like oblivious to life and life's rules sometimes. But they exist for sure. But I remember like that same day, and then we did that, and we were just like laughing and giggling, and then all of us, I was just enjoying my first time just being like that contact high, and then like everyone's like, let's go to a movie. And then that was being outside. High and outside is a different experience than being outside or inside and high. And I'm like, I do not like outside high right now as my first time, because I'm like seeing too many colors, and we're getting in like cabs and like, and I just did not enjoy that experience. And then we went to a movie and I fell asleep in the movie. And that was my first experience of it.
I've fallen asleep in so many movies. It's just thing that I get high before. It'll make it better. It doesn't make it better for me, because all I do is fall asleep. I remember my girlfriend and I went to see Lego Batman, and I remember the first 10 seconds or so, and then I woke up in the credits when she was shaking me awake, and she was like, you sat through the entire like 90 minutes of that movie. And so many others. So many fucking others. What was the most recent Star Wars movie? What's that called?
It was Rise of Skywalker. Is that right?
Okay, I never actually saw that one because I was so mad at the second one.
The Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
I was quite strong edibles when I went to see that, and I hold Star Wars too strongly in my heart. Where like,
oh, really? I did not know that about you.
Yeah. I don't read like any of the novels or any of that, but the original trilogy that my brother and I used to watch together all the time means a lot to me. It's funny now he'll call me a nerd for that. I'm like, you are the one that started this. You say he's my older brother by 4 years, and he sat me down one time and was like, we're gonna watch the best movie made. So when like new Star Wars movies come out that I think are too childish or something, I get like really fucking too mad at it, to be honest. Because I like more like darker Star Wars that's more serious, sort of sci-fi or space opera or whatever. So that second one, I'm like stoned out of my mind watching it. And there was a scene. Have you seen that one, The Last Jedi?
I have. Yeah.
Oh, it's the scene when those weird horse-like creatures bust out and they run through the casino, which I'm like, why would animals bust through glass instead of just running off into the woods? But anyway, they run through the casino, and there's this weird alien who's like supposed to be an old woman with like big beehive hairdo and like 8 breasts, and she opera sings her scream as the horse things run past her. She's like, oh. And I just went, nope, I'm out of here. I got so fucking mad. I stood up and walked out and like muttered to the entire walk up the path out of the movie theater. I admit that's fully like a ridiculous thing to do, but I was like pissed. That's
okay. I thought I did like parts of that middle one. I like the colors were very interesting in that one, and some of the directions. I think the scene where, by the way, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the second of the new Star Wars, and if you don't understand the context of that, sorry, you're watching a podcast, but this is your 5-second warning to skip ahead 2 minutes. But I remember that one. The scene where one of the characters drove a spaceship into another spaceship. And I remember like, that's fun. I remember really liking that. And then I remember like, it was the one that like the male community in Star Wars goes, nope, don't like this fucking director, Rian Johnson. But because I had loved his other movies. And so I was trying to defend it in the fact that like, I'm just not going to talk shit about it. But that scene is pretty weird.
Rian Johnson did Looper, right?
Yeah, he did Looper. He did Now You Can See Knives Out. You can see Brick, which is really, really good.
I remember I really liked Brick and I loved Looper. I thought it was one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So I had like really high hopes for that. And then what sucks about what you said, like that male reaction to the Star Wars movies from like an anti-feminist perspective.
Yeah, because
yeah. Because I hated the movie so much on like a story level, I kept trying to find like reviews of it that were negative that would make me feel like I wasn't crazy, because all the reviews were either super positive or like women are the worst. So
yeah.
I was trying to find just any negative review that did not focus on how much they hated the women being involved in the movies and the movie plot. But that's really impossible for that.
I mean it's hard to it really is, because my friend who recently passed away in October, which is really hard for me, but he loved, it's okay. I find this is why I bring it up. I find myself talking, and tell me if this is the same for you. I find once you lose someone, you talk about them more. I don't know if that's true for you, but I think about him more and more ever since he passed away. He passed away October, and I think every episode I've done since October of this podcast, I brought him up once. He's just constantly on my mind. And he said he loved the original. He read the books. He was really into when Dark Horse did the comics for Star Wars. He loved all sorts of, and then when he watched them, he liked the prequels. Okay, he thought they were silly sometimes. He's like, he goes, Darth, I can't remember his name. The guy that's the big bad guy in the Phantom Menace.
Darth Maul, maybe?
Darth Maul. He loved Darth Maul. Thought that was awesome.
Pretty badass character. Yeah.
Double-sided lightsaber, awesome. Yeah. Loved it. But he goes, he goes, Jar Jar is a little weird, like that kind of thing. So he loves Star Wars, and he goes, this is what he said. He goes, when he grew up loving the original Star Wars, loved it. Loved Star Wars was A New Hope was his favorite movie. He goes, without A New Hope being as good as it is, you wouldn't have Empire. So he goes, I love Empire, but without New Hope being good, this movie is an independent movie that would have never had a sequel if that wasn't good. And it's just really good. And he loved it. And he loved the mythology. And then when he saw the prequels, he goes, they're not as good, but it's cool to know that stuff. I like connecting dots about characters I've seen. And then when he saw the new ones, he goes, maybe I'm just too old to have joy about this because I like what I like. And he goes, I like Star Wars movies, but maybe I had to just appreciate them on a different level. Like, I like that there's movies are still being made, but them focusing on different characters, maybe that's for someone that didn't grow up with that magic. And who am I to deprive them of that? Because they're seeing a female character that's not a princess getting saved by a male character. Yeah. And it's just different. And he's like, you know what? So maybe I don't hate it, but it's not for me. And that's how I felt about it. I'm like, I like that about him, because he was what I thought was going to be those angry fans that were just like, are you going to hate it? Are you going to be like anti-woman about this movie? He's like, no, he goes, I just realized it's just not for me.
Yeah, that is an important mindset to come to, that not everything is for you. My girlfriend says to me a lot when I'll be like, what the fuck is up with this show? She's like, it's about 13-year-olds. It's not for you. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Like I see things. I'm really enjoying. I got a preview of the and this has just become TV and movie talk. We'll get into the job stuff in a minute, but I like where we're going. This is just a nice Sunday afternoon talking with my new friend Tyler. So I got into a show called Dickinson. It's on Apple, and it's about Emily Dickinson, and I really like the show like that. But I will not watch the show Bridgerton, because I watch 10 minutes and I go, that's too stuffy for me, and I go, that's fine. I think it's called Bridgerton. I think it's just too stuffy for me.
Oh, gotcha.
It's like The Crown. I haven't started The Crown because I'm like, I'm a Mexican man that lives in Austin, Texas. I don't need to know about the royal family.
Yeah, who gives a fuck about them anyway?
Yeah.
But I was gonna say a minute ago with, I think a big difference now with like, if you're going to be looking at Star Wars from like the entire time it's existed, from what, like 1977 until 2021, the way that they do movies now, just the pacing is so different that if you really like A New Hope and how slowly things all come together, it's really hard to then have that same mindset of like, you want this slow burn sort of sci-fi character building, world building sort of thing. And then with these new movies, it's kind of more the mindset of like, you know what this is, let's get right into the story, let's get right into the action. And it's very, you know, it feels cartoonish because everything is more cartoonish now.
Yeah.
So
I will say the one scene, and this will be the last, at least on my part, this will be the last thing I talk about Star Wars, unless it brings up organically next time. The one thing that really stuck in my mind about the new 3 movies was in the first movie when Kylo Ren still had the mask on. We hadn't seen his face yet. We hadn't seen Kyle Driver yet, and he stops the lightning bolt, the gun, and he stops it in the middle. And then he's the guy that shot it. I can't remember his name. He was getting dragged off, and he passes the repulsor, the bolter from his gun as he walks past. I go, that is very Star Warsy to me.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it like hits the wall.
Yeah, I really liked that first one, even though it did have a lot of like retread a lot of the same stuff from like old Star Wars movies. I thought it was setting up like a trilogy that would be very similar to the original, not in like the exact same story, but just in tone. So I think it was weird to jump from director to director though, and that's probably why they got different feels to different movies.
And that's why Peter Jackson's great. He just one director. Let's figure this out. I have 3 movies, and they're going to be 3 hours long each, and you're going to like them or you're not going to like them, but it's going to be just one dude's vision.
Indeed. Yeah,
so,
I think that's the way to go.
I was going to also say another thing that I like about you is on your Instagram. Not only do you take really wonderful pictures of your trips, but you also have really wonderful hair. You have like crazy, and like right now it's back. People can't do a little side thing people can see. It's just
It's
what
the thickest ponytail that's ever existed, probably.
It's crazy. And I remember people always like, man, what's your, where are you from? What's your background? Or how do you have such, because I'm Latino, I have very straight hair, and that's fine.
Uh-huh.
But where are you from? Where are your people from? Like, how do you look like John Stamos's hair donor? You know, like that kind of thing.
I love asking people that question, but as a white guy these days, I get this look like, why the fuck do you want to know? I'm like, I'm just interested in people's background.
You have to be very careful about it. You do have to be careful about it. Correct. That I was going to say ethnic, but it just sounded too World War II-y, you know, like but I was like, where are your ancestors from? I guess to say it, you know?
Well, my brother did, I've never gotten it done, but I figured we'd have the same answers. He got the DNA stuff done to see what our background was. And it was literally all from the British Isles. So basically we're Irish, English, Scottish, and Welsh, and that seems to be about it, which is, and I think that's because my family moved to the mountains of Virginia in like the late 1600s, early 1700s. And then nobody from my dad or mom, or no, nobody from my dad's side of the family on either of his mom or dad's side moved out of that area until my dad moved in like 1978.
Wow.
So very insular, you know, mountain communities. Hopefully it doesn't mean inbreeding and stuff like that, but just that, you know, they didn't leave that regional area that's all Irish and Scottish immigrants and, you know, some English immigrants as well for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So that's basically.
Well, I would say now that you've kind of put in more context in it, I would say you kind of do have that William Wallace, that Scottish, Welsh. I always see BBC things, and people are from Scotland or from Wales. They have really good, and especially mustache too. You have a really good, I would say, Scottish, Welsh facial hair there as well. Like I could see you're sporting.
Usually I've had short hair my whole life because it's so thick. When I grow it out, when I've tried to grow it out in the past, for months it just goes like that before it ever falls down. I figured quarantine was the only time I was ever going to have a chance to just grow my hair out with nobody seeing me through the entire awkward phase.
Yeah.
Out of like people I know in the city, I live with my girlfriend and we have 3 roommates. But other than that, I don't know. Do you know Jaron George?
Yeah, I know Jaron. Yeah, he was one of my interviews. I think he was interview number 7 or 8.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I couldn't remember if like he had moved to Portland before you moved away, or like what the time.
No, he was. I had known Jaron. I think he'd been here 2 years before I moved away.
Gotcha.
So
it is all, my entire time in Portland is blurred into one. It's been over 6 years, but to me it feels like just one long year. So I can't tell when people have left.
To bring it back to Scottish thing, it's kind of, Portland's kind of like Brigadoon. Once the fog rolls in, you kind of forget about it everywhere else, right?
Yeah, that's certainly true. Certainly true. But I think Jaron is like one of the only people I've seen. We were just at the weed store at the same time as each other. And I was like, Jaron George. Or at first I just was like, hey, and he turned and looked at me, but because I have like long hair now and had a mask on, he didn't recognize me. And he just like was like, hi, and then turned back to like the bud tender, and I was like, Jaron George. And he turned and was like, why are you saying my name in the weed store, calling me out like this? And then I picked up food from Thomas Lundy the other day.
Oh, nice.
An Israeli place. So I went up at the little order counter, you know, they're just doing the takeout right at the window. And he walks up and I was like, I recognized him even with the mask on, but I was like, what's going on, man? And he was like, hi. And I was like, what you been up to? And he's like, just making food, working. And I was like, I don't think he recognized. I don't think. And it was like on his side, it was just this customer's being real friendly with me for no fucking reason.
Yeah, that is something you have to be, like I said, going back to that Truman Show thing where it's like, social media kind of makes you feel like you're going into different chapters. Maybe we're going into the B and C plot lines of all these people that you think you're experiencing their life, but there's no tangential, hey, I saw that. You don't really, like, I try to message things like back when you message me on Instagram, we talk to each other from time to time on social media, you know, or you'll comment on a joke, or I'll comment on something you said or posted. And so we have a rapport there, but sometimes you don't. And you're like, oh, I've been watching Thomas Lundy. Oh, look, he got new shoes. You know, next time I'll see him, I'll mention his new shoes. And then he'll go, yeah, they're new. And then it goes 2 months ago. And they're like, ah, shit, I forgot. I didn't see him. And now his shoes are old. And now it's weird that I mentioned his shoes.
It's really weird that we're coming up on like a full year.
Yeah.
Mid-March is when the dispensary I was working at closed down. And I like called them the day I started to get COVID symptoms, because we had no masks or anything like that. And people were coming in sick, coughing all over us. So I knew we were going to get it eventually. So I woke up one morning and had like a really tight chest and trouble breathing. Called my boss and she was like, yeah, like the whole staff has that. So we're going to shut down for 2 weeks. And then I just never got a call back about the place, and it just never reopened.
Oh,
and
wow.
Like from what I've heard, sold to new owners and they got a new staff and reopened the place. But so that was like, yeah, mid-March. And yeah, I've just been doing like stuff that I can to make money on my own, and thankfully had some, you know, money saved up and got unemployment for a while and stuff. But yeah, it's been almost a full year of like just staying in the house almost all the time, except for the trip.
It's crazy. Tell people a little bit more, but because like people that watch my show, I know my parents will watch the show sometimes and always be fascinated. I remember one time my parents came down to Oregon, and I think they only came down once or twice, but legal weed had just opened and just started in Portland. And they walked into a dispensary, and it was like me, my brother, my father, and my mom. And they were so tightly packed in together like sardines. And I made a joke about it. I'm not sure what my dad actually said, but in the joke, my dad goes, Mijo, what cartel owns this? Like, it was like, he didn't understand what this was, but he's like, why did you bring us to drug dealers? Like, he was like freaked out about it, because they have never seen anything like that before. And it was just funny to see, like, especially the way Oregon does it. We were in North Portland, and there was little like magnifying glasses on little nuggets of weed, and everything was wood, and there was big jars of weed, and there was joints, and there was lighters and bongs. And it was just, if you've never seen it before, it's like walking into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and you might not be into sweets, you know, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, when my parents came into the dispensary I was working, they've only visited Portland once, but as soon as they walked in, my mom was like, the smell is too strong. My allergies are going crazy. I'm out here. So she just walked. It makes my mom sound like really like hoity-toity or whatever. But she's not. She just like has real bad sensitivity to like any smell, like even scented candles. So as soon as she smelled the weed in the store, she was like, I'm gonna go outside. And my dad started looking around, and yeah, I was doing that thing like eyes real wide. I'm like, no one's going to arrest you. You're fine. Like, this is a store.
Yeah.
But it's funny, people when they come in for the first time in groups, they will, like you said, just like crowd together. And like one of them will like, they'll talk to each other, and then one person will come forward and be like, we're here to see if you have weed. And we're like, yeah, we got weed.
It is it's funny. And I'm not sure if the term is, I'm sure the term is everywhere now, but when I started hearing the term bud tender, I started laughing right away. I'm like, that is so nice and so welcoming. It was kind of like a Genius bar at when Apple stores first opened. That's what who bud tenders were. They're like, we're here to help, whatever you need. Like, and you're like, what do I? And they're like, you need to tell people like why your service is important. Not only are you there to get them, but also be like, what do you need this for? Do you just want to giggle? Do you want to sleep? Do you have pain management? And tell them the benefits of that stuff. And I must think that's a very rewarding job to have, because you're kind of facilitating someone's needs, and they may be a little scared. It's like, I still take ibuprofen or acetaminophen, but it still scares me to take it, because you'll read the label and it says, if you take too much of this, your liver will bleed. And I'm like, I don't want that to happen.
I don't want that shit.
Yeah.
It can't happen. The most that's going to happen with you with too much weed is just freak out, which I had like a month ago, where I had too many edibles, and I didn't think, I'm such a pothead, I did not think I was capable of freaking out on weed anymore, but I certainly did. It was very fulfilling when I first started it, and it was just medical still, which was annoying to not be able to get weed recreationally. But when dispensaries were just medical, you did have more of a sense of like what you were doing mattered a bit more. As we had like one guy would come in every day with a certain amount of money he had budgeted to get, he had HIV, and he had a lot of body pain and like trouble sleeping. So we would always set stuff aside for him, like edibles that we knew were really sleepy edibles. Like some companies just like their stuff is always super like couch lock, they call it. And to be able to like help that guy, get good sleep actually felt really good. And then it opened up as recreational, and the shop I worked at was at 102nd and Burnside. So not, no part of Portland is like truly bad, like dangerous, but some parts are worse than others. And 102nd and Burnside, it's not a fun place to be. There's like the Mac stop and 4 bus stops, and just people always hanging around outside of that gas station, or it's not even a gas station, just that convenience store. So
that's how that is a good sign. Is it a gas station or just a convenience store? If it's just a convenience store, you're like, run away. Overpriced snacks are a bad sign.
Oh, yeah. So on our first day of recreational sales, this guy comes in, and he was my first customer on that day, and tried to, how did it go? He tried to get in without an ID, and we told him he couldn't do that. So then he went out to his car and came back with a gun and put the gun down. It was an old white dude, probably 55 or so, like looked real grizzled. And he put the gun down, and he was like, now are you going to let me in? And we were like, no. We're like behind bulletproof glass, and we're like, definitely not. And then he like ended up calling later and apologizing, and then asking if he could come back to the shop. Sometimes be like, no, you can't. You're like permanently banned. And then at the end of that day, we were packed with people too, because, first day of recreational sales, every dispensary, people were celebrating. So like everybody that wanted weed in the city was going to a dispensary. So our lobby was so packed with people, like people were having to stand and wait in line and stuff like that. At the end of the day, when everybody cleared out, 4 of our couch cushions were gone. People had stolen our fucking couch cushions while we were distracted, like selling weed in the next room. And that's when I was like, okay, this is a different ballgame then for sure.
Yeah.
Like sales.
I do imagine, because it's all the experience for people that don't know what the experiences are like. I never bought it. I lived in Portland from November of 2012 until October 31st. I left the city, I think Halloween weekend of 2018. So right before 2019 started. So pretty good chunk in Oregon. And I don't think in 2012, when did it become legal for recreational?
It was 2014 or 2015, I think.
So I lived in Oregon for 2 years when it was still medical, and there was those comics that would come in. They're like, "Oh yeah, I have my medical marijuana card. It costs this much. I just go in there." And when you go in there,
Yeah.
it's kind of like you would go into like a all white void room, and there would be these like hard, rigid chairs, and there'd be like a little reception desk, and she's like, what are you here for? And then you're like, I'm here to look at marijuana. And they're like, okay. And you'd write your name and you'd sign in. I think you'd either put like the time you arrived sometimes. I don't know why, but you like the time that you arrived.
It seems like it's actually medical.
Yeah. And it was very interesting. And then because I never bought it medically, but I bought it when it was transitioning that first month that it was recreational, and they were still treating it like medicine. And then as all the laws like, oh, this is actually something we do now. It kept like, I just walked in. They're like, do I need to sign in? They're like, nah, just come on in, man. Like,
everything changed so much. And it was weird how laws would change like every few months. So it would be like, you can only buy, if you're a rec, you can only buy this much per day, which is like 7 grams or something. And people would try to like trick us by coming back a few hours later in different clothes. And I'm like, the state actually wants me to like call these people out and be like, no, you've only gotten your 7 grams. There's so many minuscule rules. I actually got fired from a dispensary because I couldn't get something to ring up. So I took the person's money and then had everything like, then let them leave the store. And then my boss came over and I was like, I couldn't get this to ring up. So here's the money. I just need your help getting it to go into the system. And she was like, it's not legal for you to let someone leave the store without ringing it up. So I got fired for that shit.
Oh man.
That I never would have thought, because when I ran my own dispensary, it was basically do whatever the fuck you want.
Oh, I didn't know you ran your own dispensary. That's
I managed the place where the hot box was.
Yeah, I know that's where I know you. So I would think, like it's kind of like, it's not like retail. You got to treat it like it is this supplement. Like, what would you consider? It's are you in the group that considers it medicine, or is it like a supplement, like a vitamin C? What do you consider it for yourself?
For me, I've always just seen it as, I think this is the only honest thing to refer to cannabis as well. It's like an intoxicant that can definitely help certain people get through certain medical issues. So
that's very honest and refreshing.
Yeah, it's like, I certainly didn't start smoking weed because I needed help with like anxiety or body pain or anything. It's because the first time I got high, I thought it was the funniest feeling in the world, and me and a friend pretended to be astronauts. We got high on a golf course out in the suburbs because you can smoke out there and no one's around you because just fields. So we smoked, and then we were pretending to be astronauts, like just slowly walking around, and then we held our arms out for a while and just pretended to be eagles. And I remember just being like, this is the best thing I've ever experienced. And then that was when I was 15, like 2001, and I've been smoking basically every day since then.
Yeah. And it's so weird to like have, like I said, some people call it medicine, some people call it it's a recreational product, just like drinking, but maybe not as harmful as drinking. But it's funny to have this thing, and it's under so many umbrellas and so many different synonyms. But it is very funny. You don't take aspirin to feel like a child again. It's very funny that is this. And I really appreciate the laws being there. And I appreciate people like you there. Now, I didn't know about the scan thing, and I'm sorry you got fired by that, but I imagine a lot of people got fired because there's a lot of chill people that want to work in stores with weed. And then there's a lot of rules and regulations. And all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I wrote down a SKU, and then I just gave it to the person like, well, you can't do that. We will get fired for that. So you're fired. They had to unfortunately rein it in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the problem that I faced when I managed that dispensary wasn't so much like that the employees didn't know how to follow the state's rules, but that so many, I'm just going to be honest, so many Oregonians or Portlanders specifically don't know how to have a normal job. So it would be like, I've had employees, that always sounds weird because I feel like I know I was their manager and I did hire them and do all the paperwork to do all that, but it feels weird to be like my employees. But the employees, there was one who, she would come up to me and be like, you have me scheduled for 30 hours. And I'd be like, do you need more? I can try to get you more. And she'd be like, no, that's way too much. Like, schedule her for 15 hours a week. And then 2 weeks later, she'd be like, what is with this paycheck? There's like nothing on this paycheck. I'd be like, well, you didn't want any more hours. So, and then I had other people that would call up like 30. We had to fire one guy after 3 shifts because each time he would call about 10 minutes before his shift and say something like, I'm about to like start a movie with my girlfriend. Is it cool if we like knock this movie out and then I'll head in and like close up shop? And I'd be like, you want to start a movie right now? And he's like, yeah, is that cool? I'd be like, no. One time he was like, can I go take a 10-minute break, go get some coffee? I was like, you can take a break anytime you need. Like you could take more than one 10-minute break, just whenever you need to step outside, go for it. So he heard that and was like, okay, so I don't need to be here if I don't want to be. And he showed up, he came back an hour and 45 minutes later. That's how long of a break he took.
Wow.
And he just walked back in and was like, what's up? And I was like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, the third day we fired him because we told him you can't start closing the shop up until 10 minutes before we close, because not that much to do anyway.
Yeah.
So we throw stuff in the safe and leave. I walked back, so we closed at 9. I walked back there at 6 p.m. one day and he had put everything in the safes and had swept, and he was like, anytime you want to close down, I'm ready. And I'm like, we stay open till 9. Does anyone in the city fucking know how to do a job? Set hours and just show up, please.
That is so, because I came from, I grew up all over the place. Oh no, are you okay?
Yep, just spilled my coffee cup.
Oh, it's okay. I have my coffee here, so I understand. Just I'm trying to watch. You know, it's speaking of things that keep me going. I've in this time in the CBD only state of Texas, I've had to, and I'm doing I'm not drinking for the first 3 months of 2021. Like the election was scary enough, so I'm like, October, November, December, I'm gonna have some cocktails. This is a very scary time. We might not have a country if this goes a weird way. I'm very nervous, or I don't. And then that whole Capitol thing, I was sober for that. I'm like, whoo, boy, this is terrifying. And so the thing about you're talking about the job, just to get back to that, that is hilarious. Because I had like, see, let me think of the jobs I had in Oregon. Other than the jobs I ran myself, I feel like Oregon, and Portland specifically, very much do what you feel like. I've never seen a more chill downtown than in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
You're like, it's like 3:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Does no one work in this town? Like, like, and then you go, and then you're like, I don't know. It's a weird vibe. So I had 2 jobs, and my manager was like, you're so good at your job. Do you want to take a break? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm just going to have a 30-minute lunch. He goes, you can take an hour. I'm like, I think I'm just going to get this done because it's kind of time sensitive. He goes, I've worked at this job for a while. He goes, no one's ever used the word time sensitive
ever.
Everyone's like, I'll get it done, like that kind of thing. And they're like, so I appreciate it. And I stayed at that job my whole time I was at Oregon, because they're like, the guy's like, yeah, you're kind of on the ball. It's kind of nice and refreshing. You show up on time. You leave when you clock in and out. That's great. So thank you so much. I'm like, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah, I've always had my bosses here in Oregon say stuff like that to me. I really appreciate you like showing up on time today, and be like, do I have an option? Because if I do, if I can get away with coming in 45 minutes late, maybe I'll start doing that too.
Right? You ever just want to push the boundaries of stuff like that? You're like, am I the dumb one? Like, what is there some kind of like Portland initiation, like handshake that I'm not understanding?
Yeah, seriously. I think like the East Coast mindset, which I grew up in, is just so different. And it's weird to try to like mesh the two if you move to the West Coast, and it is like a much more all around laid back mindset about everything.
Yeah.
Like, I first moved here, my rent was kind of expensive. I found like cheaper places to live now, but when I first got to Portland, it was just the first thing I could get. And it was more expensive than I could pay for with my $7 or $9 an hour job at the time. I don't know if you ever heard me talk about working at the dog daycare, which I've
No.
It was a very fancy dog daycare downtown. But
what was did it have, you don't have to tell me the name, but did it have like a pun name in the
well, I'll tell you, it's called Sniff. I only worked.
It was called Sniff. That's even better than I could ever imagine.
Yeah, Sniff Dog Hotel.
Wow.
And somehow I was like, I've worked with dogs in several jobs. I've worked at shelters and stuff and other dog daycares, they call them. But for some reason, that job was just like, they had this expectation of like fanciness in front of customers that I just couldn't handle. And after 6 weeks, I just had to quit. And I ended up working at a much worse dog daycare. So it was a real step down. That second one I worked at, I don't want to say their name because I feel like the owner would actually sue me for.
We'll just call them Bite or something. We'll just call them that because it just sounds. If Snip is the good one, I would think Bite would be the bad one.
Well, what's funny is the second one I worked at, I had interviewed for when I first moved to Portland, and I had a beard at the time and not a mustache. And the place was awful, so I didn't accept. They like offered me a job, and I never called them back. And then I got the other job, worked there for 6 weeks. But then when I was unemployed again, I saw that they were hiring that first shop or the first dog daycare that I interviewed at. By that point, because I was being Bob Belcher from Bob's Burgers for Halloween, I cut my beard into a mustache and then decided I liked it, so I kept it. And I went and I interviewed with them a second time. And because I don't always think things through, or maybe it's my pothead brain, I was like, maybe someone else will interview me or they won't remember me or recognize me. And as soon as I walked in, the owner was like, didn't we interview you like 2 months ago? And I was like, no. I should have just been like, yeah, you did. Sorry, like, we never got in touch or whatever. But I was like, no. And he was like, yeah, we did. Tyler Mays, you had a beard. And I just kept denying it for some fucking reason. I don't know why they hired me, because that was such a crazy thing to do. To just double down on the, nope, that wasn't me.
I love the pothead mentality of like a beard is like the same as a Halloween mask. you're like if I shave this and I just come back with the mustache, you were like, David? I'm like, no. I love that idea. I love that about you. What I liked about when I was watching I don't remember a specific bit about that you were talking about, but this is what I remember. I remember tone a lot. I think because when you get in comedy, you don't want to steal someone's bits. Stealing jokes is like, it's hard enough to write a joke and be original with jokes. But I remember, so when I listen to people, I listen for the audience reaction, and I listen to tone and kind of like, so I would hear, it's kind of like, if it's kind of like, those things you would see on The Outer Limits where it was like the seismograph of someone's voice. That's kind of what I listened to. That's what it kind of looks like in my brain. So with you, it was like this, like, it was just like the sweet tone of a sweet, innocent, goofy tone. And it would like endear you to the audience when you would tell jokes. I'm like, that's so nice. I really like Tyler. Like, I like what he does. Like, I could never do it because I'm nervous and I'm hyper, and I do jokes about my father, and I do jokes about social issues. And not saying that we're not similar in a lot of ways, but it's just different. It's just a different vibe because we're different people. And I just love that about you. I love the idea that you are so authentically you that you would deny going into a job twice and just like, no. That's how you know. That's how you know. Is like, yeah, I'm glad you tried comedy because that's the kind of people that I love to try to do stand-up comedy, because that's the people that's hilarious. That is so strange.
My dad has a story that's very similar to like fucking up a job interview, where when it was in the 80s, and he was trying to remember the woman's name that he was interviewing with, an old woman who owned this architectural company, and her name was Norma Henry. So he said that he was repeating that in his head over and over again for like half an hour on the way to the job interview. Norma Henry, because he thought it was a strange name that he wouldn't be able to remember. It's not that strange, but he said he walked in and she's like, hi, nice to meet you. And he goes, hi, I'm Norma Henry. She just went, really? And he went, mm-hmm. And then just sat down and did not correct himself, didn't say, I'm Alan Mays, never acknowledged that he had just done that and introduced himself as her.
That's definitely, if you want to go back to the genealogy thing, that's definitely the British Isles for you. No, I will not correct myself. Yes, I am Norma Henry.
Yes, we are both named Norma Henry, isn't it?
Can you tell me, we're getting very close to wrapping up, and this has been an absolute, I never know where these things are going to go. Yeah. And I love that we got talking about movies and just talking about the travels and like, I weirdly brought up your hair, and I was like, it just almost like, but really telling you people, check out his Instagram, luscious hair. That's why I talk about it. I know it looks different on Zoom, but just amazing hair. So I just always wanted to compliment you, but you have to bring these things up in different ways, or it comes across as weird. So
I decided to grow it out just because of that old picture of Andrew WK from like 2000 whatever, who's got the white shirt on and hair down to here, and I was like, I want to look like that once in my life. Have long black hair down past my shoulders.
I like it. So, but I was like, we're going to wrap up, and it's been such a wonderful time to get to know you. But I was like, maybe can you tell me about a day, a shift, a memory in your head from your dispensary job? And unfortunately, maybe we'll do a part 2, because sometimes when in the reintroduction of talking to someone, because we haven't talked in a couple of years, it's maybe we'll do a part 2, just because I feel like there's so much more we could talk about your jobs, and I've really enjoyed that. But since we talked about dispensaries and we talked about dog grooming, either or, you pick your favorite day memory in either one of those, because it was great or because it was horrible, and then we'll end with that, and we'll do the bit, and I would like we talked, we'll revise a bit and end the podcast with that.
That's a great question, because the answer actually is at that first dispensary I ever worked at, and it was both a fantastic and horrible day, because it's just a roller coaster of both of those things. So I'm probably like 2 weeks into working at this dispensary. I'm still learning. Like, it was the most weed I'd ever seen in my life. I couldn't believe we had multiple safes stacked with weed, where the most I'd ever bought before that was like a half ounce. And now I'm looking at pounds upon pounds of weed in safes. And then learning, I didn't know about like concentrates, like, dabs and all that stuff. Didn't even know they existed until I moved out here. And I also had no clue how to go about responsibly eating an edible. So it's like 2 weeks in, and my boss gets this edible sample that was like 180 milligrams. For anyone that doesn't know, 10 milligrams is considered like one dose. So a lot of people will do half of that if they have a really low tolerance. I tend to do like at least 100 because I have a very high tolerance. But I'd never had an edible before. And my boss handed me a 180 milligram lemon bar. And he was like, here, I need you to try this out and then let me know what you think. He should have said, I need you to take this home, eat it in small pieces, report back to me in a few days. I thought he meant go eat this now and let me know if it tastes good. So,
oh my God.
So I just I knew that the unspoken rule there was like, if you were going to hit a vape or eat an edible, go in the bathroom so the cameras can't see you. So we all, everybody turns a blind eye. One of my coworkers was obviously doing heroin in the bathroom every night. So very lax environment. No one ever called her on it, but I've seen enough heroin addicts. I know what the fuck that looks like. But anyway, so I go into the bathroom and I eat this 180 milligram lemon bar, which tasted awful. It was so tart, just such a strong sour taste to it. But I was like, God damn. But I eat the whole thing for some reason. And then I went back to my boss and I was like, I mean, it tasted really tart. I don't know if people are going to want to buy them. And he was like, you just ate it now? And I was like, yeah, should I not have done that? And he was like, how much did you eat? And I was like, the whole thing. And he was like, Tyler. The way he said my name, like, Tyler. And I was like, what? And he's like, no, buddy, that's a bad idea. And he was like, good luck. He's like, he's basically like, I'm going to leave in about 10 minutes for the day, but call me if you need to go home and I'll come cover it because I think you fucked up. And I was like, okay. And it takes a while to kick in, but about half an hour later, the tops of my ears were just burning. Like, for some reason, I had just like tingling and burning sensation at the top of my ears. And I was like, this is really weird. And then when it kicked in all at once, I could not focus on anything. Customers were coming in and being like, can I look at the Hindu Kush? And I'd go, yeah, for sure. What was it you needed to see? And they'd be like, Hindu Kush? And I'd be like, you got it. And then I would go and stare at all the weed and be like, I can't make the connection between what I know I'm supposed to be doing something. And at one point I turned my back on a customer and then walked into the back, and because I forgot they were there. And one of my coworkers was like, you have a customer out here, right? Like 5 minutes later. And I had to come back out and play it off like, oh, I was looking for a product. But like that night on the bus home, like I couldn't stop like giggling, which, and you don't want to be the guy who's like laughing to himself on the bus.
I mean, unless you're Joaquin Phoenix vying for an Oscar,
Yeah. But I just remember everything that night as we're trying to close the store. They're like, can you go sweep the front? And I would stand there with the broom and be like, what is the motion I'm supposed to do to sweep. I know I've done it before. And I don't know how the fuck I even made it home. It was so much fun because I was incredibly high. But I am surprised because I was still so new to Portland too. Surprised I even made it back to my house that night.
I imagine that you probably maybe in a positive spin. I bet you sold a lot of weed that day. You maybe didn't remember it because they're like, damn, this dude, that must be good shit. The dude that works here is fucked up. I can't wait to buy. You got any fucking lemon bars back there? Also, it's also the bad thing about edibles, the people that never taken any edibles, it's weird to have like 2/3 of a lemon bar just in your pocket. You know what I'm talking about? You're like, we're such Americans. You're like, I'm just gonna eat this whole thing. I remember one time I went to Seattle and it was 2017. I think that's right, 2017. And I went to Seattle and I went to dispensary and I got these gummy bears. And edibles, I find kind of at the beginning of they're not, you can't like make them perfectly the same every time.
Oh, no.
I find that's the one thing, even with legal recreational marijuana, it's a very hard thing at the beginning. I'm sure they're getting better at it as this becomes one. But the lady said there were 10 milligrams, and like take a head and eat the head of a gummy bear and then just see where you are. And so I did that, and I felt like they were way stronger than a 10, or maybe I but I remember I was like, oh, my heart's pounding too fast. I was in a hotel room and I go, I have to do jumping jacks, and if I don't do jumping jacks now, I'm going to die. And so I did like I had to do shows later that day. I go, maybe I'll just sweat it out. And so I did I felt like 30 minutes of jumping jacks, and then I would run in place. I'm like, fucking get out of me, THC. I just need this THC. And I had to go do a show. Like I had to go to this place called the Jai Tai, and I had to go do a show. And I was like, come on, I was trying to like Richard Simmons or like it just out of my system. And I'm like, okay, I'll be fine. I'll just gotta sweat it out. I remember like going, this is the highest I've ever been in my life. And I go, well, time to go do comedy. And it was a good set. It could have been better, but it was a good set, at least in the fact that I remember I was smiling a lot. And I think that put people at ease. I hope they liked it. So, man, that was such a fun story. I cannot believe that you took 180, because I remember at 10, I was surprised how strong that was. So I could only imagine that 180, that's like, that is just mind blowing to me, but I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, I made it through.
Yeah. So let's look at this box. Let's see if I can find anything. The box that I have right here, for people that don't know, we did it last week in the podcast, but I have this box, this Nike box of old premises that I've kept in a box that from time to time on shows, writing sessions, I will write premises, I will write jokes, I will write half bits that I've never done on stage that I've always meant to get to. And as this is a quarantine time, I can't go on stage, I think the best way to do a bit is in front of a person. And so we're gonna pull something out randomly. I'm gonna be honest with you and read it as it's written. So if it's like horse shit, that's fine. It's these are raw materials that I would one day hope to be a joke, and we're just gonna talk about it. Does that sound good?
Sounds
perfect.
Good to me.
All right, so we're gonna pull something out. I'll go a little deeper. All right, let's see what this says. Okay, so this is an old piece of paper right here. It's got words on the beginning and front. It says, let's figure out, let's see. So on the back it says, Dad's a factory that creates storks holding babies. I don't know what that means. But
I love finding those.
Yeah, Dad's a factory that creates storks holding babies. One says burned victim body, beautiful. I think it says burned victim body, beautiful something acceptance. So I can't read. And then okay, so that's something to think about. Then I wrote more full ideas on this side. Let's see. Here we go. Yoga pants. This just says yoga pants superpower. So that just has that on there. I wrote Law and Order Special Kittens Unit. I don't know what that means, but I like that. Like I go, maybe I was in a place where I'm like, SVU is a little too serious. I like Special Kittens
Yeah,
Unit.
that's the sort of, when I think of your comedy, that's the sort of joke that I think about.
Yeah, so it's kind of
Special Victims Unit. How about Special Kittens Unit?
yeah, like something silly. I'm a big fan of doing silly things. It just says adorable animals messing up, crime scenes and animals just bugging Mariska Hargitay. That's what it says on the like. I just like the idea of like, oh no, all the goldfish are too close to the cats or whatever. Like I think that's what I meant by that.
I love the yoga pants superpower. Makes me think of a superhero whose powers only work when they have yoga pants on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they always look a little ridiculous while they're doing.
Because that's when I first started seeing yoga pants was in Portland, and it was like depending on the person, they'd always be like bright colors, like it was like yellow or orange or red, and they'd have this like they look like an off-duty Marvel character, like like that's what it would look like to me. And I never got it, but this is in the moment I would just write down what I thought. It's like, oh, I'll remember it later, and sometimes you don't remember it. This one says snooze button. I go reassessment of your life clock, and I think I was getting up early at the time. I think I had to start. I was working in the job that I had. And I go, I think that the more you hit the snooze button, the more it's just a reassessment of the bad life choices that you've made. You're like, no, I have a bad life. 10 more minutes. Like, I just like that idea. Just like, no, I've made bad. I should have studied more in college. Snooze.
Builds up because I used to date a woman who was a nurse, and she seemed to hate it. Had like 12 to 16-hour shifts, and she would snooze for like 2 hours. So I think that. Super accurate.
It's just this weird because it's not enough. The snooze button feature, how weird and kind of torturous that is, because it's not enough time to get enough. If you didn't get enough sleep, it's not enough time to really get more sleep. It's just like, I have to be more conscious soon, but I'd like to be this amount of conscious. So good. Talk to you later, responsibility. Talk to you in 10 minutes, responsibility.
Yeah,
so like that
it's just long enough for you to fall asleep again before it jerks you back into
like some kind of weird slumber roller coaster or something like that. So that one's not bad. That one's still kind of that could maybe be something one day. And then I go, this must have been when I was I felt like I was doing a lot of drinking late at night, but I was not working out or taking care of myself. So because this makes sense. This one, the last thing on this little sheet, this is little sheet at the very ending, and it's cut off a little bit, but I can read it. It said, I would do anything for love, but I won't do exercise. And I go, I love Meatloaf. I was probably doing karaoke a lot.
I really do love Meatloaf.
Yeah, I like Meatloaf, and I like Meatloaf the person. I like Meatloaf the dish. It's one of those enjoyable things. I think it's funny to call him. There needs to be more people in the singing industry that call themselves after comfort food. Like if Mac Miller was Mac and Cheese Miller, that would have been great.
Yeah, Meatloaf is just such a funny name that we all got so used to just calling this man Meatloaf.
Yeah, and I like the idea of like I would do anything for love, but I won't do exercise. Like that's so lazy. Like that's more effort to write it down and complain about it later in a joke than it is to actually go walk around a park for 30 minutes.
That is one of the earliest music videos I ever remember seeing is I Would Do Anything for Love. Like just such a weird video. He's like, it's a Beauty and the Beast sort of thing.
Yeah, but he's like Phantom of the Opera and kind of like Bela Lugosi kind of vibe, but like he's also on a motorcycle, and it's like way too long. It's one of those like long music videos.
It's like November Rain where you're like, good Lord, cut out the 4 minutes.
It's like 10 minutes long. And you're like, what is that one thing he won't do? Like it asks more questions than it solves, that song,
Sure.
But
have you watched any of Meatloaf's like music videos from like the late 70s, early 80s before music videos were like even really a common thing? He has these like really gothic like music videos, very dramatic. He was such a, I don't know, he's such a weird dude. He seems like a normal sort of looking guy now, but in the 70s, the long hair and the billowy shirts.
I thought it was because I grew up super scared of certain I grew up very much listening to the idea that heavier music would influence my, like, I was like, because I grew up Catholic, but so I'm like, oh no, I'm scared of the devil all the time. And those album covers of his were terrifying. Bats riding, the idea of a bat driving a motorcycle, which is kind of like the theme of 2020. If you were to have a theme of of what it is, what we've experienced in a horrible year that is 2020 going into 2021, a bat riding a motorcycle into hell is kind of perfect for what we want to, like, this kind of sucks.
I was always scared of that shit too when I was a kid, like, because I was raised in a Methodist church, but like my parents are very liberal Christians, but I don't think they knew they had to sit me down and be like, the stuff you're gonna hear is like stories. You don't need to freak out and get really worried, okay? So yeah, I would be like, if I listen to music like this, I'm gonna go to hell. And I remember like in 8th grade hearing the Sex Pistols for the first time, and when Johnny Rotten says, I am the Antichrist, and I was like, I can't listen to this. I'll go to hell. It's so funny looking back on that. Eventually my parents be like, you can relax. Like, yeah, it's cool.
I remember, you know, you catch videos, depending on where you catch videos, it may be old to some people, but it's new to you whenever you find music. That's what's wonderful about music. You know, like, I remember I found Fuck You Like an Animal by 9 Inch Nails way too late. And the video scared the shit out of me. But people had already known who Trent Reznor was and 9 Inch Nails. I'm like, do you know about this 9 Inch Nails band? That's terrible. And they're like, yeah, it's fine.
Is that the video that has like the dark claymation?
It's not, it's the one with like, there's like a spinning pig head on a contraption. And there's a lot of like palmetto bug sized cockroaches crawling around, and there's like sawdust. And then he's got like steampunk goggles on, and then someone's blowing like air in his face and his cheeks are getting really big. And, or maybe that's Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson might've also crawled in my brain at that time. I don't know.
That's 90s, like edgy sort of stuff where it's like cockroaches.
Yeah. It's so funny now in retrospect, but it was at the time terrifying.
I remember being scared of kids that had 9 Inch Nails t-shirts. Like, don't really mess with them. They're like on a weird depressed level that I can't mess with.
Exactly. And I was always like, I always felt like, oh shit, he just said, I want to fuck you like an animal. Like, this is a naughty song. Why does this feel like my ears are masturbating right now? This is very bad. But that's our podcast. That's everything we're going to talk about today. Unfortunately, like I said, I definitely want to have you back for an episode 2 to get back to talk about all the jobs we didn't even have time to talk about. But we've been talking for about an hour and 20 minutes. So this went by in a fucking flash. And thank you so much for being so fun to talk to. Tell people where they can find you, and tell people what you've been doing. Like, give everybody a little where they can get a hold of you.
Your Dog Loves Me on Instagram is a good place to get in touch. And I haven't put much up new stuff on YouTube, but I've got like old comedy videos on there from the before times and all that. Mostly everything I've been doing since March is trying to work on movie scripts that'll probably never get bought or made into anything, but you got to try. And writing more science fiction short stories.
Wonderful.
Well, if you want to read any of the sci-fi that I've written, there's a novel called Man in the Multiverse and a short story called The Temple at Bata Klen. And I'm much prouder of the short story than the novel.
Yeah, send me all the links and I'll put them in the description below in the YouTube video. Right. But this has been so much fun. Tyler Landon Mays, thank you so much for talking to me today. And if you could say one word about your work experience, we'll end with this. One word about your work experience that we talked about, the dog and the dispensary, what would it be? And then we'll end.
I would say liberating, because I have realized that any old jackass can run a business and I can too. So it has given me confidence going forward that maybe I can get my own stuff off the ground in the future and,
nice
things too.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again real soon. It was a real pleasure talking to you. And we'll hopefully see you in Oregon in 2021 in later months.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Talk to you later, buddy.
See you later.